Hi everyone, thank you for joining. Welcome to our special Women in Sport webinar today in honour of International Women's Day 2026. This is all about driving better performance in sport and also in a business sense as well. So the International Women's Day theme for this year is Give to Gain, and we have brought together some of our really valued partners from within our business and also our sponsorship partners at both Triathlon Ireland and Harlequins Rugby Club to have a really hopefully insightful and enjoyable chat today about some of the issues that are really prevalent in the women in sport field. So as we kick off, pun intended, I just want to introduce everybody to who's here today. So just quickly on myself, I'm Elaine. I'm the Content and Comms Manager here at AccountsIQ, and really pleased to have these fabulous women on the panel with us today. We are really proud to have these partnerships with such prestigious sporting institutions, and I think it's really great to have them here today. So over to Ruth. I'll start with you.
I'm Ruth. I am a former British champion, IQ group. Super happy to be here today, obviously to discuss all things women in sport and of course the business side of things as well with regards to expensive.
Great, thank you. Just want to say we have got a couple of technical issues with a couple of the speakers today. So if we have to turn people's cameras off or take them off stage, they still will be on the call and you still can interact with them via the chat. So please do use that function. But yes, we have some internet issues, so please bear with us today. Great, but thank you, Ruth. Lizzie, on to you, please.
Hiya, I'm Lizzie. I'm a full-time professional rugby player and I play for Harlequins and I'm a member of the Red Roses squad.
Fantastic. Sarah.
Morning everyone. So my name's Sarah and I'm a physiotherapist working at Harlequins Women's Rugby Club and I've been here for the last 3 years.
Fantastic. Holly.
Hi, I'm Holly, an elite triathlete representing Triathlon Ireland and hopefully giving a bit of a athlete perspective today.
Thanks, Holly. And then Eleanor, as I say, Eleanor's camera isn't working today, but hopefully we can hear you, Eleanor. So Eleanor is the Women in Sport lead at Triathlon Ireland. Oh, there you are, Eleanor.
Thanks, Elaine. It is quite intermittent here at the moment, so I do apologise. But I am the Women in Sport lead, the ED&I lead and the National Anti-Doping Officer with Triathlon Ireland for the last 2.5 years and been involved with Triathlon Ireland for the last 8.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so let's kick off then. Just a little bit about why we're having this conversation today. I think the themes that we're going to dip into today are about increasing investment, increasing visibility and awareness of women's sport, and also just talking about when you're investing time and effort into anything, whether it's a business system or whether it's a team, then performance can really improve, especially if you've got access to the right information, the right data and the right systems. So that's what we're going to delve into today. Now, we've selected some specific topics to talk about. So we are going to be talking a bit about health and performance and also how that sort of balances out in terms of equity. We're talking about investment and professionalism, access and pathways, media and representation, and then what's the future for women's sport as well. So we're going to start with health and performance. So Sarah, I'm going to start with you here as the resident physio. So I don't know if everybody can see. I'm just going to maximise the slide here. There's a very concerning stat here which says that women are 2 to 8 times more likely to suffer ACL injuries than men in comparable sports. Obviously, that is probably quite a generalised statement, but in terms of what is sometimes described as a bit of an ACL academic. In your perspective, why is this happening? Is it about biology? Is it about training? Is it about the kind of equipment or footwear, things like that? What kind of things have you come across in terms of this?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Starting with quite a meaty topic here. I think, from my point of view, like the ACL epidemic is partly real, but also partly due to that visibility. And whilst we are seeing those injury rates rising, we're also seeing that participation, that professionalism, and improved like medical access also rising, which in turn leads to that increased reporting, increased availability for scans, and also, I guess, increased media coverage. So you're having a lot more kind of professionalism, professional athletes. You're then seeing it more in the media. You're then seeing it. So it's a little bit of is it a true epidemic, or is it just we're able to see it more because we've got better access to medical teams and injury cover. So I think that's probably part of the epidemic. But I think with regards to like the root cause of it or where it might come from, I think it's the biology of females. Like, it does contribute, but I don't think it explains the whole gap. I think the anatomical differences that women have and the hormonal and the neuromuscular differences are an important consideration, but I think things like training age, training design, and all sorts of other things also play a massive part in it. So I think it's a really interesting topic. I don't think it's going to go away or change much too soon. And only as research kind of increases and people's investment and interest in the area improves, like it'll become more kind of understood, hopefully, in the years to come.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really interesting. I want to open this up to some of the professional athletes we've got here. Holly, what's your take on this? I mean, obviously with triathlon, you've got lots of different sort of parts of your, parts of the anatomy that will be stressed at different stages of competition. But how do you find the sort of attitudes towards women's health or women's recovery and things like that with regard to what Sarah was saying?
I think in terms of like an ACL specifically is probably not really like a triathlon specific injury. Ours is probably a lot more like bone stress or a tendinopathy or like an overuse injury because we just much training we can do pretty much. But yeah, like personally, I've like got more support recently, but I think it's maybe at like a certain performance level that becomes available. So like at a bit of a lower level, maybe it's like you kind of got to find your own support system.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting that obviously with your sport, it's lots of different things that will probably come into play as well. Lizzie, moving on to you, it's probably the ACL is probably more sort of a concern in your sport. What's your take on all of this?
Yeah, I suppose rugby is quite an ACL heavy, that's one of the more common injuries, but I don't think it's a concern going into play rugby. It's one of those sort of occupational hazards. People do get injured, and I think medical cover at the top level has definitely improved, but as Holly said, I think further down towards the grassroots level, it's slightly trickier to get the help you need. But again, I think probably it's not necessarily an epidemic that we're facing. It's just the awareness and the visibility and the fact that, it becomes more known about, I suppose.
Great, thank you. Cool. So, yeah, moving on, I think that sort of leads us nicely into sort of investment and professionalism. So just thinking about the stat on here. So women's elite sport represents around $2.5 billion global growth opportunity. So obviously there's a lot of sort of potential still to untap here. You know, do we think, again, this is probably quite a meaty topic, but what do we think of the sort of the infrastructure and the systems and the resources that are available here? Lizzie, I'm gonna stay with you if that's okay. Just in terms of the sort of the evolution of professionalism in rugby, do you feel like it's being sort of kept up with in terms of investment? Is it keeping up with the pace of the growth of the sport?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely been progress. I think significant progress, and I think with the World Cup recently, it was absolutely game changing. That we've had more ticket sales. We're bringing in much more excitement, I suppose. With over 80,000 tickets sold for our final, and even the Black Ferns were a bit late to their bronze medal match just because they hadn't, they assumed the crowds weren't going to be as big. But yeah, I think there are still issues with investment. I mean, at the top levels, there's still even people with salaries, they need a second job alongside it to sort of supplement, their full-time working athletes. Yet the expectation stays the same for, working women and, fully professional players. So I think that can be really difficult. But, investment on the game as a whole has absolutely grown and is definitely going in the right direction. And with the increasing crowds and sort of broadcast coverage and even the commercial interest, they've all been in helping inspire young girls to sort of join the sport. But, as we said earlier, even access to medical support and facilities and performance staff, we still need more investment to sort of keep that aligned with the expectation on the sport as a whole and as the athletes. So, I think with the standard of rugby rising so quickly, investment is trying to keep up and doing a good job, but I think there can be more. Yeah.
Absolutely. Eleanor, I'm going to try and come to you here because I think this is a really good question for you in terms of, we all agree that probably, more funding would be very welcome. Where do you feel like that funding should come from a governance perspective? Where should it come from, and also where should it go? What areas should really be benefiting from additional funding? I don't know if Eleanor can hear me, but if anybody else wants to jump in on that point, then yeah, does anyone have a view on that? Ruth, I might come to you on that one actually, just because I know as a former athlete, but obviously sort of you sitting at the the juncture between business and sport as well. Do you have a view on sort of how extra funding could be assimilated?
Yeah, I think it's a real mixture. I know from really high revenue sports such as football, obviously a lot of funding comes in the form of sponsorship, and that is probably a really big driver in the difference between the funding in the male game versus the female game, as an example, because male sport is obviously a much larger scale, which attracts more sponsorship. So that is where that additional funding is coming from. I think hopefully as the women's sport grows across the board, it'll attract more sponsorship. For example, women's football, women's rugby over the last couple of years has grown hugely in terms of the audience that it's reaching. So that in itself hopefully will attract sponsorship and sort of funding from that stream. We've obviously then also got to consider growing sport, I suppose, female sport from at the entry level. So in terms of funding, in terms of government support, local council, etc., trying to get women and girls in sport and keeping them there, I think, is another stream to consider. There are quite a lot of women, female athletes like myself as well, who have quite frequently had to alongside as well. So I know when I was at university, for example, as a full student, I was also working 20 hours a week to keep myself in sport, because the funding in taekwondo is actually not great across the board, regardless of male or female side of things. So I was working 20 hours a week as well, and then I was also training 20 hours a week. So I was probably doing about 80 hours without transport between all of them as well. So there are a few different streams, I think, to consider, and obviously it depends on where within the process people are. At entry level, there's a lot more put on schools, councils, government to fund and keep women and girls in sport. And then you've also got hopefully improving funding from sponsorship streams, and also then obviously providing contracts in terms of national teams. In Wales, I'm Welsh, so in Wales, the Welsh rugby team, for example, female rugby team, I only had professional contracts a couple of years ago, whereas obviously the England team have had them for slightly longer. So we are very much playing catch up, even at a national sort of team level as well.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Eleanor, I'm going to try and come to you again if you can hear us, because I think this is a really interesting one for you. Do you have any views on sort of, where the funding would best be sort of directed in this case? Don't worry about turning your camera on. I know that you're having issues, but if we can hear you, that'd be fantastic.
Super. Thanks so much. And again, my apologies for the couple of tech issues I'm having here. I suppose, where should the funding really go? There is no real one place to send it. From our perspective, we receive quite a lot of funding from Sport Ireland, which we're extremely grateful for. And I suppose, for example, that has led us to a brilliant opportunity to create what we would call our Women in Leadership Pathway Programme, which has been successful in upskilling women in the sport. For example, we have 50-50 split on our board. We have surpassed requirements from Sport Ireland. We have 40% participation rate across all age groups for women, teenage girls and under 18s. And in 2024, 30% of our club chairs were women, which is a significant increase from a couple of years previous. And very, very importantly, I suppose, given the topic of this webinar, our high performance development pathway is a 50-50 split. We also have representation at Europe Triathlon, which is so important in a leadership role, that not only do we have influence in Ireland, but we have influence within Europe as well. So I think from an example perspective, we can see if funding goes into leadership, the outcomes of that through the participation rate, through the board level requirements, through the chairs, through to international representation. And it's something we are very proud of.
That's great. That's really good insight. Thank you, Eleanor. And we can hear you perfectly. So thank you. I wanted to add in, we've had a really good comment in the audience chat, which I'll probably direct back to you, Eleanor, just in terms of, again, where we were talking to Ruth about where the extra investment comes from. Katerina in the chat said, I would agree with Ruth on sponsorship across governmental and private sponsors. From my experience as a female international indoor volleyball referee, this is crucial to support sports across board, especially those that are not professional and still developing. Do you have a view on that, Eleanor?
I suppose within the funding that we receive through Sport Ireland, it's imperative that we strategically align where our funding goes in tandem with our strategic plan. We follow pillars based on the Sport Ireland Women in Sport programme, and like that, coaching and officiating is one of them. And we will directly, and we have been directly investing into them. And for example, we've recently set up a women's local technical official pathway programme, which is imperative if we want more officials and more women officials in our sport. So from our perspective, we don't get outside funding from a sponsorship in the terms of how we align our Women in Sport programme. We do it through the funding received from Sport Ireland. But like that, it's been smart and being strategic in where we can send our funding and how best we can support women in our sport. And something we're very proud of in triathlon is that we encourage women not only to do the sport, but to be the sport. So from that officiating perspective, that is an option for those that don't want to stay actively doing the sport. It is an opportunity through officiating to still be involved in the sport.
Great. We've had a lovely comment for you there, Eleanor, in the chat. We are so lucky to have the support of Triathlon Ireland in upskilling as women in sport, says Karen. I have reaped the benefits of this support. So that's a nice one. Great, thank you guys. I'm going to move on to our next topic, which is access and pathways, which I think we've kind of hinted at already, just in terms of dropping down into perhaps the more grassroots areas. There is some evidence that sort of teenage girls are likely to disengage from sport after primary school and when they sort of enter secondary school and beyond. Is that to do with visibility of role models? Is it to do with clear progression routes to elite sport? Is it purely just an age thing? I've got 2 teenage girls myself. One completely gave up sport. One has carried on and it loves her football, and it's the one thing that she does. So yeah, really, does anybody have, before I go to anyone in particular, does anyone on the panel have a particular response to this that they want to offer?
I can jump in there if that's okay.
Great, yeah.
Hopefully, again, you can still hear me if there's any issues.
No, we can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
I suppose given the teenage group, it is understandable that they do drop off in sport, but it's trying to get there before they do even have that inkling of dropping off. There is the pressures from school, studying, university or whatnot, the financial cost, and I suppose the body confidence and a sense of belonging is one as well. But like you mentioned there, the role of female coaches and club leaders, and we're very lucky in triathlon that our junior membership is 46 to 48% when it comes to men and women or boys and girls. We're very, very lucky in that sense. And as I alluded to already about the high performance pathway being 50-50, we have created, again, through the Sport Ireland funding, some teenage girl specific programs. So if any of you've heard of the Her Moves campaign that Sport Ireland are running, an absolutely brilliant initiative. And it's all about empowering young teenage girls in their sport. And it's something that we've created a program out of. And it's their voice. And that's what's something which is so, so important for us is social. The social side of sport is the reason a lot of girls primarily keep coming back. So having those programs and those pathways in place for them to stay in is so important. And as I said already, with the board representation and all the leadership opportunities, we do have those for teenage girls as well. So we have what we would call our junior tri-captains program, which brings in an element of coaching into their age group specific. But we also have a young leaders program that we started last year exclusively for young women, and the Student Sport Coaching Academy. If some of you are familiar with Student Sport Ireland, we support that as well. And like that, it's getting ahead of the drop off is really important. So as I said, it's not just doing the sport, it's being the sport and having those opportunities ready, that if we do see there's a fall off, well, how can we keep you? Retention is extremely important to us in Triathlon Ireland.
That's really great. Thank you. I'm going to open this up to our athletes now, because I think it's really important to hear your personal perspectives of this, if you're happy to share. Lizzie, I'm going to come to you. When you were trying to get into the sport, did you always know that that's what you wanted to do, or were you heavily influenced by role models or by the media? I'm just really interested in how that journey played out for you.
Yeah, I, funnily enough, was not very interested in the sport as a whole to start with. Role models have been massively important, but when I started playing, I sort of never had a career in mind. I just turned up because I enjoyed it. And that really was as far as it went. And I sort of didn't follow the professional game. I didn't really watch very many matches. And it was as I continued playing and I sort of got exposed to a bit more of the high level players and seeing what they were achieving, the standards they set, their leadership, their dedication, even the way they sort of carried themselves when I saw them. I think it just made a huge impression on me. I think that was a big part of what pushed me to take the sport a bit more seriously. I also think it's sort of not only the role models on TV, but because rugby was such a diverse, it's such a diverse sport. I've had amazing coaches and teammates who, as soon as you get involved in this sort of amazing community and with a huge age range, the age range is, you can play at any age. So it was just brilliant. I think seeing people who, even again from the grassroots level all the way up to the elite level, your role models are the people around you, and they have such brilliant attitudes and work ethics. And I think that was another reason that I wanted to continue, and in addition to all the amazing women that I saw on TV. And I think that's what makes rugby and women in sport so amazing. It can inspire you to be the best sports player you can be, as well as the best person you can be. I think it's definitely both.
Great. You forgot, when you were saying about all the amazing coaches, you forgot to say the amazing physio as well, but I'm sure you meant
Sarah already knows. I already told her.
On that note, I just wanted to, before I come to you, Holly and Ruth, I just wanted to come to you, Sarah, in terms of, I don't know if working with sort of young women coming into the game is part of what you do, or whether you are involved in that at all. But, rugby is a very, obviously physical, high contact sport. Is it something that young girls often get put off by that, or what's your experience of this?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. So here at Quins, we've got a pathway with University of Surrey. So we're building that up over the last couple of years. And then we also have a feeder college in through Worthing College. So we're starting to see these young girls at 16 heading off to college, playing some more rugby, and then coming through into the University of Surrey programme. And then the idea is to then pathway that up into the Quins programme. So we're seeing more and more kind of over the last few years of that excitement and interest growing. I think some girls will be put off by the fact that how physical rugby is, but it's been really fun to see how some girls absolutely thrive in it, and the mud, the contact, they love it, and it's almost like a little bit of a competition to see who can get the filthiest and who's putting in the big shots, and watching them on the sideline as they're cheering each other on when they make a good tackle, or when they chase someone down, or when they're running through to score a try. Like, that's been really fun to see. So you look out and you see girls of all sorts of shapes and sizes and kind of levels of quality on the pitch, and they're there encouraging each other and cheering each other on. And I think rugby has got that really well done in the last kind of little while, and watching the girls kind of, yes, I guess, support each other and cheer each other on has been like a massive encouragement to all of us on the side watching them.
That's great to hear. Yeah, really cool. Holly, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Obviously, triathlon's kind of a new emerging sport to many of us, maybe not to you, but interested to hear about your pathway in, and your experiences and what inspired you.
So no, I actually agree. It is obviously a newer sport. Like, I actually didn't know what it was myself until I was maybe like 15. So I grew up swimming. To be fair, through school, I was kind of encouraged to do every sport, bit of everything. So for me, like, again, like Lizzie said, it wasn't necessarily like that I knew sport would be a career at that point. It was just something that I like really enjoyed and wanted to be involved in, and it kind of just progressed that way. But I was always a bit of a swimmer, runner. And then when I went to university, it became a bit more of a like professional thing. But even now, like with Triathlon Ireland, like we opened a national centre in 2024 in Limerick. So I guess now the guys leaving like school, college, junior age now have a bit of an option to continue triathlon like past school into an elite environment, I guess, while still studying. But yeah, mine was always just a bit of fun until it wasn't anymore, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, until it gets a bit more serious.
Yeah. And do you sort of, this might be a strange question, but do you sort of see yourself as a role model in terms of, do you feel like it's important for you to encourage new people coming through as well?
I think that's become a bit more prevalent the last couple of years. Like, I never really did, and I also still kind of don't, but then I guess I get asked to do things like this and I think, yeah, maybe I actually am, maybe people are actually watching. So yeah, I'm even really out of my comfort zone doing this, but then I guess that's why I agreed to do it, because I'm like, people do probably look up to me, which is lovely, but I'm just never really seen myself as that type of person.
Yeah, oh, good for you. Thank you for being here. Ruth, I'm going to come to you with the. I know that you don't actively participate as much as you did, but obviously, you know, it was a huge part of your life, and you did phenomenally well in your taekwondo career. So it'd be really interesting to hear about your pathway in. I know that you're having a few issues as well, so feel free to turn your camera off if that makes it better for us to hear you. But...
Yeah, apologies in advance. It seems to be dipping in and out, so please let me know if you can't hear me.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I started taekwondo when I was 5 years old. And it was just, my parents wanted me to do something a little bit different, I think. I was already doing swimming and like all of your normal sort of sports that children go and do. And they just really wanted me to learn a little bit of self-defense, do something outside of the kind of the norm. I did it in the sort of traditional sense, learning the self-defense, doing your gradings, etc., until I was about 12. And actually, that is the point I sort of wanted to give it up. I wasn't 100% certain if I was in it. A bit like what we're saying here, I'd gone to secondary school. And on the days that I was going there, my friends were going out and they were doing things. And I was thinking, I kind of want to do the same thing. Like I want to go to youth club on a Friday with everyone else instead of going to training. So I kind of had this minute where I very nearly gave it up. My parents convinced me to stay. They actually just said, like, do another year, and then we'll come back to it and we'll think if you still want to do it. And then along came the 2012 Olympics in London. And I watched Jade Jones, who is Welsh from a very small town, similar to me, win gold at 19. And that really was like, oh, actually, you don't have to be from the big cities. You don't have to have the pathways and everything else. Like if she can do it, so can I, kind of thing. Because there's very little, and there was even less so back then, support in Wales for sports such as taekwondo. There's no performance pathway in Wales. When I actually joined the national team, I used to have to drive to Manchester to train with them. So that was really, that was my journey. I kind of watched her win the 2012 Olympics when I was 14, thought to myself, well, she can do it, why can't I, sort of thing. And really then got more so into the competitive side. Started competing a little bit more in the UK. I beat the British champion at the time on my first event in juniors when I was 15. And then I got selected to go to the Commonwealth Championships when I was 16. So it was all a bit of a whirlwind. There was no, it was kind of like, if she can do this, so can I. And then that really motivated me. And then I had a little bit of early success, I think, which fed into keeping me in the sport. And it probably moderated then when things got a little bit harder when I went into seniors, because I'd had that sort of early success. But to be completely honest with you, there was a point, it's very, very likely that I would not have been sat here today had my parents not convinced me to give it another year. And I think part of what Eleanor said earlier is having some peers and having a really good group around you where you're held to account, and you know if you miss a session, everyone's going to be saying to you, where were you last week, or where were you on Monday? I think that is a really big part of keeping women and girls in sport, because for me, around 12 was kind of when my friends were also dropping out as well, because they were going and doing other things. And I think that plays a big part in it as well. And I do a little bit of coaching now, and I look at the young female athletes that we have at the minute, and we have a really nice group of them. And actually what that does, it feeds into it, because it is, where were you last week? Are you coming to training? I'll see you on Friday. That really keeps women and girls in sport, I think, particularly around that age where they might go off to secondary school and start doing different things as well.
That's great. Isn't it annoying when our parents are right as well?
I know.
No, that's fantastic. Does anyone else have anything else to add on that, or should we move on to the next topic? Okay, so it kind of ties into this. We've been talking about role models and representation a bit. Just want to expand on that a little bit more now. Women's sport accounts for 15 to 16% of total sports media coverage globally. So that is according to the UN Women report last year. Personally, as a massive sports fan and women's sports fan, I'm really pleased to see, you know, how much more women's sport is on telly. Even small things like when you go to, I'm a big football fan, when you go to look on Google or the internet on what the latest results are, if you put in, you know, England football or Spurs football or something like that, it will now come up at the top, men's football or women's football. And that to me is a huge leap that we've seen just in the last couple of years of like, it's not just automatically assuming that you want to know about men's. But there's obviously still a huge way to go. Does anybody have anything that they want to say about media coverage? We don't have to be controversial here, but just anything that has got better or that still needs to get better within your sports or within the industry as a whole.
I might jump in there, Elaine, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine, Eleanor. Thank you.
Just on the back of what Holly said about we're a relatively new sport, so we don't get domestic television coverage, unfortunately. But from what we control within ourselves, we do prioritize equal coverage across our events, across our races, and so does World Triathlon, which is brilliant to hear. When it's leading from the top down, it's very easy to support what their narrative is as well. We are very, very lucky in the sense that we do prioritize both our coverage, but we're a firm believer in it's not just the results that need to be exposed, it's are showcased, it's the stories behind them. And for instance, if you look at some of the coverage of races that we held over the weekend, you very much see that community spirit, particularly amongst women, which is so important for sport. And it's something that we build on massively, is the personal development as well. So it's not just the doing the sport, but you can see that coming through on our media coverage that we do. But we would love to get more domestic coverage, but unfortunately our sport isn't a mainstream just yet. But we are very passionate that we give equal representation on our coverage, and as well as media representation, we're very lucky to provide the same prize given money, for example, as do World Triathlon. So we have progressed a lot from other sports, and hopefully it will follow suit.
Thank you. Lizzie, I'm going to come to you on this. How much does it mean to the athletes when you get more media coverage or more representation? Because I can imagine that sometimes that kind of being thrust into the spotlight thing can be quite intimidating, as well as, you know, you want it to be good for the team and for the sport. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it can only be a good thing, you know. It's such a good feeling that you know, the attention's finally beginning to balance out a little bit, and you know, people are so interested in hearing from female athletes and getting involved in the sports and watching it. It can be overwhelming. I know over the World Cup there was, you know, I don't know the numbers, but the amount of media and, you know, interviews and just everything grew exponentially. It was wild. So I know it can be quite overwhelming for athletes, and I don't know that anyone ever feels prepared. Again, like today, this is not a very comfortable opportunity, but it is an opportunity, and you know, we're all excited to be able to be a part of the growing world of women's rugby and women's sport, I suppose.
Yeah, and you make a really good point there, that and actually we've had a comment in the chat as well about more media coverage is always needed to encourage women to get involved in sport, especially taking up new sports. We have seen this happen after London 2012 and many other events then after. I think what you were saying there about, you know, the World Cup and things, you know, it seems a shame almost that we have to wait like 4 years to get this kind of swell. You know, in women's football, it seemed to sort of obviously the Euros in 2022 and then last year as well. everything swells, and there seems to have been some continuation of that, but in some of the sort of lesser covered sports, it seems to they have to wait their turn every 4 years or so. Is that something that Holly, I'll come to you, is that something that you think that will kind of improve? Are there other things that could be done better, or do we still sort of have to rely on that kind of swell of media coverage every few years?
I think there obviously is a big increase, like say the games come around, or for some sports like World Cup, or I think it depends on probably the country, maybe. So like other countries kind of buy into different sports, I guess, like national sports. I think like I went to university in Leeds, and that was where like Alistair and Johnny Brownlee and like Jess and Georgia, like the leading triathletes, male and female in the world, were all based in Leeds at that time. So like the media was like, it was easier to be more like prevalent in that situation, because those were the guys at the front of our sport, like winning. But yeah, I think triathlon is just always growing. So hopefully it just continues to get a bit more coverage. But yeah, I think like there's a lot of coverage on, say, like we run like a national series for like domestic racing, and that gets quite a lot of attention, like quite a lot of media coverage, especially on like social media, which is great. And I think like off the back of that, our participation levels have grown so much. But yeah, in terms of elite sport, I think triathlon's just fighting with bigger sports for coverage. But yeah, hopefully we get there at some point.
Yeah, thank you. Ruth, how about you? You said that you obviously London 2012 was the big sort of kicker for you to get involved. Your sport is probably one that only has its day every 4 years as well. I mean, is that me making assumptions, or are things kind of changing? And
I think things have changed a little bit since 2012, and obviously the impact on me, but there is very much a real sort of uplift after the Olympics. We saw it again after Rio 2016 and the Tokyo Olympics as well, with entry level sort of kids seeing this on TV, and even adults as well, and then thinking, actually, what is this sport? And you kind of put it on and you've got no idea what the rules are or how anything works, but it looks quite exciting, and it seems like something you might want to have a go at. And there's quite a push after these big events as well, in terms of come and have a go sessions and come and kick a pad, and you go to these events and kids have a go at it, and then they think, actually, this is something I want to try, I want to join a club, etc. So there are definitely peaks after large events such as the Olympics. We've also seen it after things like the European Games. Outside of that, probably similar to triathlon in terms of much less coverage compared with football, for example, rugby and the more mainstream sports. It has got better in recent years. They have brought in Grand Prix, so the best taekwondo athletes in the world go against each other, and then it comes towards the Grand Prix final at the end of the year. There's also been the introduction of prize money as well, and taekwondo is a sport actually where everything is equal, so it's equal prize money for men and women. It's also equal coverage as well, so actually it is very much more a level playing field compared with other sports. With those Grand Prix, it has made its way onto BBC Red Button as well, so you can get this access. Whereas before, I remember watching my friends, my training partners competing abroad, and you'd have to find a YouTube link, and sometimes it wouldn't work, and you'd have to know their exact match number because they don't put the name on the link, and it's not great for access if you are not already aware of the sport and know where to look for the draw sheet, etc. So it is getting better, and you have got access on things like BBC Red Button if you want to catch up and watch it live. Having said that, that initial exposure in terms of quite a lot of the time, people just get involved in these less known sports, either through someone they know at taster session, or just because they see it on something like the Olympics. Like, you kind of need that initial exposure to make you go, what is this sport that looks interesting? Should I give it a go? rather than having to actively look for it. And I think that is key with non-mainstream sports, is that initial exposure to get that interest, so that people will want to have a go, and it really helps them in finding that is right, particularly for people who, men or women, are not interested in the more mainstream sports.
Sorry, Ruth, we're losing your sound there a little bit, but thank you. That was really interesting. So I want to make sure that we leave some time for some questions, because I think that we've had quite an active audience chat. So I'm sure some people might have some questions for us at the end. But just before we finish off, just wanted to look at sort of what happens next in the bigger picture. Obviously, you know, our involvement as AccountsIQ and Expensing with both Harlequins and with Triathlon Ireland is on the sort of data and insights side. So we're the data and insights partner for both of you, obviously. And that obviously looks at performance data and how that is used to improve performance of the team, and analysis and all of those technical things, and that obviously spills over into what we do for our own customers as well. I'm really interested in how that is kind of filtering down in terms of training, and how the programs at the clubs and and in triathlon as well, how that sort of how important is having that data and that insight to how you sort of shape your performance. Sarah, I'm going to come to you and see whether that impacts what you do.
Yeah, so in our wider kind of performance and medical team, we've got some incredible sports scientists and performance coaches who look at data every day. So for all of our athletes, we will track things like their GPS running load, we'll track things like their strength scores and jump scores and all sorts. And this helps us predict or can help us predict their load and their injuries. And we track things like acute chronic workloads, which kind of predicts any spikes or drops in running load, which can then help us prevent things like soft tissue injuries and tendinopathies and maybe some bony stress injuries as well. So we use that sort of stuff really regularly. Our sports scientists use some great platforms to then present all this data to us and present the data to coaches so that they can understand it better as well. And then we've got our analysis team who clip all of our games back, and the girls are able to look back through and look at their own performances and kind of analyze how they might change things or do things better next time, or they use it to prep by watching games of their opposition for the upcoming games to see how they can kind of work together to hopefully win at the weekend.
Great, thank you. And Lizzie, how have you found that? Is that quite a relatively new thing that's been introduced, or is it evolving quite rapidly? Do you find that the sort of data and analysis side of things is quite heavily involved in your training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we sort of get the outcomes of it. So, we get told what training we're doing and everything like that. But when you ask the physio, when I ask Sarah, you get a look behind the curtain and see how much has gone into it. And I do think, when I sort of started playing rugby, there was definitely just the expectation that we just would copy the men's program. That was what it is. And I think there has been much more acknowledgement of the, different physiologies, and just we are different and we require different training, tailored training to us. And I think it's definitely beginning to show. There's definitely been a massive shift into, evidence-based tailoring to our performance, where historically, all the data collected on the men's side of things doesn't necessarily directly apply. So yeah, I think it's definitely been noticeable, and I do, as the athlete side of it, I don't know anything about all the science stuff, but I do know that it's taken into account and definitely looked into.
Great, thank you. We do have a question that's come through on that I'm going to ask now, actually, because it's really relevant. So Amy has come through on the chat saying, can I ask a question around technology and women in sports? where do you see the most exciting tech breakthroughs for elite women athletes right now? And how well is the industry responding with female-specific design rather than retrofitting existing products? So that goes back definitely to what Lizzie was saying. Eleanor, I might come to you on this one if you can answer that. So, how is technology playing a part in what you do?
Find me a triathlete that doesn't love data. We absolutely love it. As I sit here with my Garmin watch, and I'm sure Holly is the same as she's there. But it's so important, I suppose, for athletes, particularly women, using the likes of the Fitter app, and even down to Garmin now has technology to be able to track your cycle. And for athletes, particularly in the high performance space, how they schedule their training around their cycle is so imperative. We see the research coming out now more and more. Like previously, there was only 6% of research done was on women solely. Like, we're not small men, so it's so important that the research that is coming out in the theory space is now going into the applicable, and that's coming through right down to the technology, the likes of your Garmin and your various apps that we use, which are so important when it comes to tracking your cycle and your load going on to which phase of your cycle. And it's something that maybe Lizzie can jump in on in terms of the ACL. We do see that there's a higher risk of injury at certain points of the cycle. So how can we prevent injury from happening? That may cost, if God forbid a high performance athlete was going to a race and something happened, could that have been prevented? And again, the technology shows that the data will help you track. And as I said, triathletes absolutely love technology and love data. So yeah, it is extremely important. But it's also very important not to get too wrapped up in it, particularly those coming into the sport. We don't want them to see it as a must-have for the sport, but definitely that higher end. And I suppose we look at what we do at My Tri ranking with AccountsIQ from a national governing body. That shows us the data of the timings and helps us be able to I suppose rank ourselves through the ranking system. And then we can look at how does that filter out into the wider population. We do have every athlete's ranking based on that. And I suppose it's all intertwined, and it will help you train and help you improve. The technology is there, and I suppose don't get overwhelmed by it. Reach out to people who can interpret it. And I think that's so important with technology, as well as being able to interpret it. Is people get, as I said, they could go down rabbit holes. They could link into unaccredited social media influencers. Making sure that the interpretation of the data is correct is so important.
We've just had a comment in the chat from Karen as well, saying the ranking system information also brings a great sense of crack in the club setting. It gets very competitive, and that's never a bad thing, I guess. Holly, do you have experience of that?
Experience of the ranking system.
So things getting quite competitive. So people looking at their rankings and then wanting to sort of outdo themselves or each other.
So I think, like on the My Tri ranking, it shows like the domestic racing with elite racing. So like, say for example, if I was to go and race like a World Cup, like elite level, it will give me a score that someone can race a domestic race and kind of see how close they could get to that. And like, I think an algorithm, but like it works however it works, I guess. So like in terms of that, I guess people are like, oh, I would have finished this place in this elite level race. So yeah, personally, not really, but I can see like people maybe comparing themselves to the elites in that way. Which is like good. I guess it gives some perspective of like where they would fit in that race. And then say if we were to go and race like a domestic race with the like age group community, it kind of, I guess that does clarify like where you actually are because you're in the same race as well. So yeah, the ranking points, I can see how it could be competitive among like club members. Not necessarily maybe like the high performance side, but yeah, like using the high performance side to like rank themselves.
That's a really interesting point you make there about, sort of the domestic being able to compare themselves, because that's again another example of how you can get more people into the sport. If they're seeing, oh, actually, I fairly close to this, or I could, with a bit more sort of support and training, I could get there, then that might encourage people to take it a bit more seriously or go more professional route. Great. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up. We've had another comment, another question, just about in terms of the future of women's sport. What can people listening to this call or people downloading the recording do to support women in sport? Ruth, I'm going to come to you. Obviously we can watch things and we can buy tickets and things like that, but what else can we do as non-sports people to sort of accelerate change?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it then. Obviously buying tickets, coming through the doors obviously provides funding, which in turn feed into sponsorship that we mentioned earlier. We also touched on it in terms of women are not small versions of men, as Eleanor said earlier, and I think there is quite a bit of a conversation sometimes in terms of comparing with male statistics, numbers, etc. I think building more of a women's profile and treating women as a completely separate entity, I think in some ways, as a standalone sport, like women's taekwondo from my perspective is very, very different to male taekwondo. The ways in which we compete are very, very different, and one isn't better than the other. They are completely different ways of working. And I think in acceptance and in understanding that, I think that in itself can bring women's sport forward and support the sport. In just accepting that there are differences, and actually what makes women's sport so great in some aspects is completely different from what makes male sport so great as well. We've also got obviously getting behind women's sport in terms of increased sponsorship, driving campaigns as well, holding even things like this webinar today, I think shine a light on women's sport, the incredible things that women are doing. There are lots of women out there who are obviously doing incredible things in the sporting world and also holding down jobs and, having families as well. I think shining a spotlight on the achievements of women is huge and will also go a long way in promoting women's sport, getting girls involved, having your role models as well. Obviously, in terms of maybe even social media, there's quite a lot of female athletes now on the likes of TikTok, Facebook, etc., sharing their experiences, and I think that reaches a really wide audience and can go a long way in terms of sharing experiences, both positive and negative within sport, that creates acceptance and then obviously can help to promote it as well.
Yeah, I think the social media point is an excellent one, and I think it's it's not only allowed more sort of visibility of things, but also invited fans and people to participate and contribute to debate and everything a bit more. So yeah, that's definitely going to play a part, I think. We're kind of at the end, guys, but just key reflections. I think it's been a really good session today. Thank you so much. I know that some of you did feel a bit out of your comfort zone, and I know that there have been some technical issues, but all of your contributions today have been fantastic. I'm sure the audience agree. I think from a sports fan perspective, it's really exciting to see how much is going into women's sport in terms of investment, technology, just discussion. There is, yes, of course, a long way to go, but I think all the signs are really positive. So I've really enjoyed chatting to you guys about all of this today. We are coming to the end of the session, but if anybody has any other questions, we will be sending an email after this with the recording, and also details on how you can send us feedback or other questions as well. But thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a really fantastic session, and yeah, thank you so much for your time.